This is my ranking of the best turn-based RPGs I've played, based purely on my personal experience. Each title is placed from masterpiece down to trash, depending on how polished, memorable, and satisfying the overall experience felt. Let's dive right into the list. Star Renegades is a roguelite turn-based RPG that really impressed me with how smart and tactical the combat feels. Every run plays out differently, and I have to carefully plan interrupts and counters instead of just attacking blindly. I also like the bond system between heroes because it makes my squad feel like it's growing across each run. The evolving enemy officers keep the pressure on, so I can't just play mindlessly. It can be challenging at times, but for me, Star Renegades clearly belongs in the great tier. Persona 5 Royal sits at the very top for me. I already loved the original, but Royal made it feel complete. The combat feels smoother and smarter, especially with the gun changes and those showtime attacks that make battles more dramatic. The third semester adds a full new story arc that actually matters, not just bonus content. I also liked how Mementos feels more alive and less repetitive this time. Small changes like new confidants and extra dialogue made the world feel even richer. After more than 100 hours, I was still fully invested in the characters and their journey. For me, this isn't just a masterpiece tier game, it sets the standard for turn-based RPGs. Fire Emblem Three Houses gave me one of the most memorable strategy RPG experiences I've had. I love how much freedom it gives me, from choosing a house to shaping each student into a completely different role on the battlefield. The combat feels deep but fair, especially with battalions and the rewind feature letting me recover from big mistakes. What really stayed with me, though, is the story. Watching the characters grow, then facing them in war after the time skip made every decision feel heavy. It's rare for a tactical RPG to balance gameplay and character drama this well. For me, this easily earns a spot in the masterpiece tier. Fuga Melodies of Steel 2 was one of the sequels I was most excited to play, and it did not disappoint me. It keeps the same core gameplay loop from the first game, but adds more pressure and smarter systems on top. The new judgment system and tougher resource management made every decision feel more serious. I especially liked how the soul cannon became an active threat instead of just an option, which added real tension during boss fights. The story also feels stronger this time, with better character development and higher emotional stakes. It doesn't reinvent the formula, but it refines it in meaningful ways. For me, this lands comfortably in the great tier. Octopath Traveler II surprised me in the best way. At first, it felt very similar to the first game, and I wasn't sure if it was doing enough to stand out. But the more I played, the more I realized how much it improves almost everything. The stories are stronger, the characters feel more alive, and the added interactions like crossed paths and the final chapter help tie things together better. Combat is still one of my favorite turn-based systems ever, and the new latent power mechanic adds another smart layer of strategy. The world is also more rewarding to explore, especially with the day and night system changing what I can do. It refines the formula without losing what made the original special. For me, this sits comfortably in the excellent tier. Clair Obscur Expedition 33 really impressed me, especially for a debut RPG. The combat is the highlight for me. It takes classic turn-based systems and adds active timing with dodges and parries, which keeps me fully engaged even during enemy turns. Each character feels unique, and learning how their mechanics work together made battles exciting from start to finish. The story is heavy and emotional, dealing with mortality and grief, and while it can get a little dramatic at times, the performances and presentation carry it strongly. I also appreciate that it respects my time with a tighter runtime and very little filler. It feels inspired by the greats, but still confident in its own identity. For me, this earns a solid spot in the excellent tier. Divinity Original Sin 2 didn't click with me at first. The difficulty felt brutal, and I honestly thought I was doing everything wrong. But once I lowered it, learned the systems, and really understood how its layered combat works, something shifted. The depth here is unreal. Elemental combos, positioning, environmental effects, every fight feels like a giant tactical puzzle. The freedom in quests and character builds also makes the world feel alive in a way few RPGs manage. Yes, it can be messy and overwhelming, but once it clicks, it becomes incredibly rewarding. The storytelling, player choice, and combat depth all come together into something special. For me, this absolutely belongs in the masterpiece tier. Persona 3 Reload reminded me why this story has stayed with me for so many years. The core narrative about facing death and finding purpose still hits hard, and the remake strengthens it with better visuals, smoother combat, and fully voiced social links. I really liked the added social events with party members, especially the new moments with the male characters that weren't there before. Combat feels faster and more stylish with third-G attacks and the shift mechanic, which keeps Tartarus from feeling too repetitive. The new voice cast and rearranged soundtrack also give everything fresh emotional weight without losing the original vibe. It's not perfect, and some older design ideas still show, but it feels like the definitive way to experience this story. For me, this lands in the excellent tier. Marvel's Midnight Suns surprised me more than I expected. The card-based combat felt strange at first, but once it clicked, I really enjoyed how dynamic and creative each battle became. Knocking enemies into walls, into each other, or through explosive objects never stopped being satisfying. I also liked how each hero feels distinct, both in gameplay and personality. The campaign is long, and while the social side at the Abbey can feel a bit excessive at times, it still adds depth to the characters. It may not be perfect, but the combat system alone makes it stand out in the genre. For me, this sits comfortably in the great tier. Shin Megami Tensei 5 is one of those games where the gameplay completely carries the experience for me. The combat is deep, demanding, and incredibly satisfying once I understood how demon fusion, essences, and team building all work together. I love how it forces me to prepare carefully for bosses instead of just grinding mindlessly and hoping for the best. The open netherworld areas also add a nice sense of exploration that keeps things from feeling too linear. That said, the story and characters didn't connect with me the same way Persona usually does. It feels more focused on big ideas than personal moments. Even with that weakness, the combat and customization are strong enough that I had a great time overall. For me, this earns its place in the excellent tier. Sea of Stars instantly grabbed me with its beautiful pixel art and classic RPG vibe. What I love most is how it blends old-school inspiration with smart modern ideas. The lock system in combat keeps me thinking every turn, and the timed hits make battles feel active instead of passive. Exploration is also more engaging than I expected, with platforming, time-of-day mechanics, and hidden secrets that reward curiosity. The cast is charming, especially Garl, who really brings heart to the story. While the ending feels a bit abrupt and there are small pacing issues, the overall journey was memorable and polished. For me, this comfortably fits in the great tier. Baldurs Gate 3 completely absorbed me in a way very few RPGs ever have. From the start, it gives me freedom, but it constantly reminds me that every choice comes with consequences I can't fully predict. I love how reactive the world feels. Characters remember what I did, factions shift because of my decisions, and entire quest lines can change or disappear. The party members are some of the most compelling I've seen, and their personal stories feel just as important as the main plot. Combat captures the creativity of D&D perfectly, letting me experiment with spells, positioning, and wild strategies. Even with some bugs and pacing issues later on, the overall experience is unforgettable. For me, this is absolutely a masterpiece tier game. Dragon Quest XI's Echoes of an Elusive Age completely changed how I see the series. I used to think Dragon Quest was too simple or too traditional for me, but this game showed me how powerful that classic formula can be. The story begins in a familiar way, yet it slowly adds emotional weight and surprising twists that genuinely caught me off guard. I really appreciate how comfortable and polished everything feels, from the straightforward turn-based combat to the flexible skill trees and party customization. The characters grow on me more and more as the journey continues, especially once the post-credits content expands the narrative in meaningful ways. Even with some presentation issues and repeated music, the adventure feels timeless and heartfelt. For me, this stands proudly in the masterpiece tier. The Caligula Effect 2 really did not work for me. While I can see that it tries to improve on the first game with deeper themes and more character focus, I found the execution frustrating. The story leans heavily on long dialogue scenes, and the pacing constantly drags because of it. Even though the combat system has interesting ideas, like planning moves ahead of time, it never felt exciting enough to carry the experience. Dungeon design becomes repetitive, and fighting the same enemies again and again made progression feel like a chore. The presentation doesn't help much either, with bland environments that don't match the stronger character art. In the end, I just didn't feel invested or entertained. For me, this lands in the trash tier. Warhammer 40,000 Rogue Trader immediately grabbed my attention with its scale and ambition. I love that it lets me play as someone powerful from the start instead of just another random hero. Being a rogue trader with influence, resources, and authority makes every decision feel weighty. The combat is deep and extremely crunchy, and once I understood the systems, setting up powerful combos with my party became very satisfying. The writing is what really stands out for me, though. The quests, companions, and moral choices capture the brutal tone of the 40K universe in a way that feels authentic and engaging. It's long, complex, and sometimes overwhelming, and the bugs can definitely get in the way. Still, the quality of the world building and tactical gameplay carried me through. For me, this earns a spot in the excellent tier. Honkai Star Rail surprised me with how polished and complete it feels for a free-to-play game. The story grabbed my interest early, and I stayed invested because of the strong character writing and the way each world feels detailed and alive. I really like the turn-based combat since it rewards smart team building and planning instead of just fast reactions. Mixing different paths and elements gives me a lot of flexibility, and tough boss fights actually push me to improve my setup. For me, this lands in the mediocre tier. Triangle Strategy really impressed me with how serious and thoughtful it is. I love how the story focuses on politics, tough decisions, and real consequences instead of simple good versus evil choices. The voting system where my party can disagree with me adds real tension, and sometimes losing a vote actually surprised me in a good way. The combat is where the game shines the most. Positioning, elevation, and combo attacks make every battle feel like a puzzle I need to solve carefully. I also appreciate that each character has a fixed role, which makes them feel unique instead of interchangeable. The pacing can drag because there is a lot of dialogue, and some voice acting feels flat. Still, the strategic depth and meaningful choices make this one stand out for me. I'm placing this in the excellent tier. Piece Odyssey left me pretty mixed. As a fan of the series, I really wanted this to be something special, but it feels like a very average RPG with a One Piece skin on top. The combat is simple and easy to understand, but it rarely pushes me to think differently, especially since I can switch characters freely with no real downside. Boss fights were the biggest letdown because they feel like stronger regular enemies instead of big dramatic encounters. I did enjoy seeing the crew's abilities animated so faithfully, and the character interactions get better later in the game. Still, the pacing drags, there's too much backtracking, and it takes far too long to truly get interesting. For me, this lands in the mediocre tier. Expeditions Rome really stood out to me because of how ambitious it is. I love that it mixes political drama with tactical battles, letting me argue in the Roman Senate one moment and lead troops into war the next. The turn-based combat is challenging in a good way, and I always felt rewarded for smart positioning and teamwork between my units. The variety of missions kept things fresh, especially the larger multi-stage battles where mistakes actually matter. The story and characters are also surprisingly strong, with complex choices that rarely feel simple or clean. That said, the mass combat system can be confusing, and some of the mechanics are not explained clearly. Even with those issues, the depth, historical setting, and tactical gameplay make this one easy to place in the excellent tier for me. Wasteland 3 completely won me over with its mix of dark humor, brutal choices, and tight tactical combat. I love how every major decision feels uncomfortable, like I'm choosing between two bad outcomes instead of a clear good or evil path. The writing is sharp and often funny, but it never forgets how harsh its world is. Combat feels precise and rewarding, especially when I set up ambushes or chain abilities together to wipe out enemies in a single turn. I also appreciate how much freedom I have in building my squad, whether I want smooth talkers, hackers, or heavy weapons experts. The soundtrack and strange characters give it a unique personality that sticks with me long after I stop playing. For me, this isn't just great, it's easily in the masterpiece tier. Yakuza Like a Dragon really surprised me in the best way. I was unsure about the shift to turn-based combat at first, but it ended up being one of my favorite parts of the game. Ichiban is such a refreshing main character. He's not perfect, he's a bit naive, but he has heart, and that makes his journey from rock bottom feel meaningful. The story is dramatic and very dialogue-heavy, but I stayed invested because of the strong character moments and emotional twists. I also love how much side content there is, from wild sub-stories to classic Sega arcade games. It feels like a full world instead of just a main campaign. It may not be my absolute favorite in the series, but the bold combat change and memorable cast easily place this in the excellent tier for me. Final Fantasy X is one of those rare RPGs that stayed with me long after the credits rolled. I went in with doubts, but it quickly became one of my favorite entries in the series. The story feels emotional and focused, especially with the journey through Spira and the themes around faith, sacrifice, and destiny. Titus grows on me more as the game goes on, and the party dynamics make every major scene hit harder. The sphere grid system gives me real freedom in how I build my characters, and I love how customizable the overdrives and summons are. Combat feels strategic without being rushed, and boss fights often demand smart planning instead of brute force. The music and cinematic presentation still hold up, and several scenes are unforgettable. For me, this isn't just a great Final Fantasy, it belongs in the masterpiece tier. Jagged Alliance 3 really hooked me with its mix of tactical depth and over-the-top 80s action energy. I love building my squad from a group of unique mercs, each with their own personality, strengths, and weird relationships. The turn-based combat feels tense and rewarding, especially when I clear a sector without losing anyone. Positioning, stealth, and smart use of Overwatch make a huge difference, and I'm always thinking a few moves ahead. I also enjoy the larger strategy layer, like protecting diamond mines and managing contracts because money truly matters here. The world feels alive, with sectors changing hands and choices affecting how towns react to me. There are a few technical issues, but nothing that stop me from playing for hours at a time. For me, this easily earns a spot in the excellent tier. Shadow Heart's Covenant is one of those RPGs that feels strange in a good way. I had built it up in my head for years, and while it didn't completely match that legend, I still found a lot to love. The story can be uneven, and some character motivations feel weak, but the cast really shines when the game lets them be weird and funny. Yuri is a great lead, especially with how casually he reacts to all the madness around him. Where this game truly stands out for me is the combat. The Judgment Ring system is incredibly satisfying, and the amount of customization it offers makes every fight engaging. I also love the creepy dungeon atmosphere and the surreal battle music. It's not perfect, but the depth of its mechanics and its unique tone easily place it in the great tier for me. Darkest Dungeon 2 is one of those games that frustrates me and pulls me right back in at the same time. I've had so many runs end in disaster, usually because stress spirals out of control and relationships fall apart at the worst possible moment, but that tension is also what makes it so gripping. I love how the stagecoach journey replaces the old dungeon system and forces me to plan each route carefully. The relationship system adds another layer of strategy, since one bad choice can ruin team synergy. Combat still feels tense and tactical, and the art style remains striking and memorable. It's brutal, and sometimes it feels unfair, but when everything clicks, it feels incredible. For me, that balance of frustration and depth puts it in the great tier. King Arthur Knight's Tale is a game I have mixed feelings about, but I can't deny how much I enjoyed the gameplay. The tactical combat is challenging and rewarding, especially when I take the time to scout enemy positions and set up smart openings. Managing armor, positioning, and character abilities makes every fight feel strategic instead of random. Building up my castle and developing each knight through their skill trees adds a strong sense of progression too. Where it loses me a bit is the story. The grim tone feels overdone, and the morality system ends up feeling more mechanical than meaningful. Still, the depth of combat and overall challenge kept me invested. For me, this comfortably sits in the great tier. Chained Echoes completely blew me away with how polished and confident it feels. The story hooked me early, especially with Glenn's guilt and the way the larger political conflict unfolds. The cast is strong across the board, and even side characters feel meaningful. Combat is where it really shines for me. The overdrive meter forces me to think every turn instead of just spamming my strongest attacks, and I love that battles fully heal me afterward, so I can go all out. When mech combat unlocks, it adds another smart layer without feeling overwhelming. Exploration is rewarding, the pacing is tight, and there's almost no wasted time. For me, this easily earns its place in the excellent tier. That wraps up my personal ranking of the turn-based RPGs I've experienced so far, from the absolute standouts to the ones that fell short for me. Your picks may differ, but these are the titles that left the biggest impression on my journey. Thanks for watching.